Lean closer to the fire, and imagine a warm evening 2,000 years ago when a Roman family sat down to supper beneath a quiet mountain. The bread was fresh, the wine was watered. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked at the fading light. No one looked up at Vesuvius. No one had reason to. The mountain had been still for so long that no one alive remembered it being anything else. And yet, deep beneath their feet, something was beginning to stir. Welcome to Stories Under the Stars. Settle in, the fire's still warm. The wood pops softly, and the night around us is deep and kind. Tonight, the story takes us to the Bay of Naples, to a bright Roman city called Pompeii, in the late summer of the year 79. It was a prosperous place, red-roofed, sun-warmed, full of gardens and bakeries and painted walls. Some 20,000 people lived there, going about the ordinary business of an ordinary life. Above them rose Vesuvius, green with vineyards, gentle in shape, beloved by the people who lived in its shadow. They did not know it was a volcano. Their word for that did not yet exist. So let the fire keep you warm, and let your breathing slow. We are going to walk the last quiet streets of Pompeii before the mountain remembered what it was. Picture the city in the early morning, the day before the end. The light over the Bay of Naples was that particular Italian gold that makes stone look soft. Fishermen were already on the water. Bakers had been up for hours. There were bakeries on nearly every street corner in Pompeii, 33 of them at least, with round stone mills turned by small, patient donkeys. The smell of baking bread drifted through the narrow lanes, mixing with wood smoke, and the faint salt of the sea. In the Forum, merchants were setting out their stalls. Fish from the bay, olives, dark and glossy in clay jars, figs, almonds, garum, the pungent fermented fish sauce Romans loved on almost everything. Wealthy women passed through in bright stolas, followed by household slaves carrying baskets. Children chased each other between the columns. Somewhere, a poet was complaining about the price of wine and scratching his complaint onto a wall. Graffiti that archaeologists would read, almost unchanged, 2,000 years later. There had been small earth tremors for days. Not alarming. Pompeii had felt tremors all its life. 17 years earlier, a large earthquake had damaged the city badly, and parts of it were still being rebuilt. Scaffolding against the temples, fresh plaster drying on the walls. The people had simply grown used to the ground moving a little. A cup sliding on a table. A hanging lamp swaying for no reason. These things happened. The fire crackles softly here, and the stars above us are the same stars they saw. Out in the countryside, farmers noticed that some of the springs had gone dry overnight. Wells that had flowed for generations were suddenly silent. A few wild birds left their nests and did not come back. But no one read these small signs together. No one had the book that would have told them what they meant. The mountain waited. The city went about its day. By mid-afternoon, the day had grown hot and still. Across the bay, at the naval base of Misenum, a 17-year-old boy sat reading in the shade. His name was Pliny. He would be called Pliny the Younger to distinguish him from his famous uncle. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, was the commander of the Roman fleet stationed there. He was also one of the most curious men in the empire, a scholar, a naturalist, the author of an enormous encyclopedia of the natural world. On that afternoon, the boy's mother came to them in some distress. She had seen a strange cloud. They walked out to look. What they saw across the bay was something neither of them could name. A great column rising from the top of Mount Vesuvius, tall, white, branching at its crown. Pliny the Younger later wrote that it looked most like a pine tree in the Italian shape, a long trunk, and then a wide, spreading top. It rose and rose, miles into the sky. We know now what they were seeing. It was the mountain emptying itself. Magma, pressurized for centuries, had finally found its way upward and was being blown, pulverized, into the atmosphere at enormous speed. The column would eventually reach some 20 miles high, but they had no word for any of this. They only knew it was remarkable. And the elder Pliny, being who he was, ordered a small, fast ship made ready. He wanted a closer look. Then a message came. A friend's wife, living at the foot of the mountain, was trapped and begging for rescue. His mission changed at once. He ordered the warships launched, not one but a fleet, and he sailed straight toward the thing in the sky. The fire crackles. Close your eyes if you like. Across the bay, Pompeii was still standing. The afternoon sun was still gold, but ash had begun to fall on the city like a strange, warm snow. In Pompeii itself, the ash was light at first, like pumice, like tiny gray stones, falling soft as grain. Children caught them in their hands. Shopkeepers swept the doorways. Then it came faster and faster. Within an hour, it was no longer falling. It was pouring. The pumice piled up in the streets, a finger deep, then a hand deep, then to the knee. Roof tiles began to crack beneath the weight. Somewhere, the first roof collapsed, and after that, the sound of collapsing roofs became part of the afternoon. A distant, irregular thunder, closer, then closer. Some people ran. They gathered what they could carry, a bag of coins, a small bronze statue, a lamp, a key, and they went down toward the harbor, hoping to leave by sea. Others hid. They went into the innermost rooms of their houses, the rooms without windows, and they closed the doors. They thought the strangeness would pass. It had always passed before. The sky had gone dark by now. Not the dark of evening, the dark of a shut room. Pliny the Younger, watching from across the bay, wrote that it was not like night. Night has stars. This was a darkness that had swallowed the sun. Through it, the ash kept falling, and below the ash, the pumice kept rising around the houses of Pompeii like a cold gray tide. The fire here burns low and steady. Breathe slowly. You are safe. We are only remembering. On the mountain side of the bay, Pliny the Elder had landed with his ships at a town called Stabiae. The sea was too rough to return. He went to the home of a friend, and remarkably, he insisted on dinner. He insisted on a bath. He lay down for a nap. His companions heard him snoring. He was trying, in his last hours, to teach the others by example, that if the old naturalist was not afraid, they should not be afraid either. Sometime in the small hours of the next morning, the column of ash and stone above Vesuvius grew too heavy to hold itself up, and it fell, not outward, down. This is what geologists now call a pyroclastic surge, a superheated cloud of gas and ash and rock, denser than air, that flows down the side of a volcano like a dark river made of heat. It moves at 100 miles an hour. Nothing outruns it. The first surges swept down the northern slope. They destroyed the town of Herculaneum in moments, sealing it under a wave of boiling material that hardened into stone. At Stabiae, Pliny the Elder had finally been woken. The air had become difficult to breathe. He walked to the shore with a pillow tied to his head for protection against falling stones. There, on the beach, he sat down. He asked for water. And the story goes, he simply did not get up again. His nephew, across the bay, would later write his uncle's death into one of the most famous letters of the ancient world, the only eyewitness account we have of that night. And then, before dawn, the surges reached Pompeii itself. The people still inside the city, those who had hidden, those who had waited, those who could not leave, did not suffer long. The heat took them in an instant. The ash that followed settled softly over everything. Bread left in the ovens, coins in a purse. A dog still chained in a courtyard, a family in a cellar, arms around each other. The city did not burn. It was buried, sealed, preserved. The fire crackles. The stars have not moved. 2,000 years would pass before anyone knew, truly, what had been kept beneath the gray ground at the foot of the mountain. And when they finally began to dig, they found not just a ruin, but a morning, interrupted, held exactly as it had been. By the time the first light should have come, there was no light at all. The sky above Pompeii had sealed itself shut. The column of ash that had risen the day before had grown so vast, so heavy with its own weight, that parts of it began to collapse back down the slopes of the mountain. Not as rain, not as gentle falling stone, as something else entirely. The old stories call it a pyroclastic surge, a cloud of superheated gas and ash, hotter than boiling water, moving faster than a person could run. It poured down Vesuvius in waves, one after another, each one reaching a little further than the last. In Herculaneum, the closer town, the first surge arrived first. It came through the streets in near silence. The people who had sheltered in the boat chambers along the shore, waiting for rescue that would never quite come in time, were there when it reached them. The old stories say they died so quickly they did not have time to move. Archaeologists, centuries later, would find them still huddled together, bone against bone, exactly where they had waited. In Pompeii, a little further away, the ash kept falling. Roofs that had held through the night began to give. Beams that had been sound the evening before cracked under the weight of stone that was no longer light. Inside the houses, the air grew thick and hard to breathe. Some people stayed where they were, curled in corners they knew, holding what they loved. Others tried, even now, to leave. Imagine for a moment walking out into a street you have known all your life. The fountains you knew by name, the bakery on the corner, the painted walls, all of it gone gray, all of it muffled. The ash is to your knees, the sky is a ceiling. And somewhere above you, somewhere you cannot see, the mountain is breathing out again. The fire has burned low now, let it. The night is long, and there is no hurry. Somewhere out in that lost city, a lamp was still burning when the first surge came. A small flame inside a small clay vessel, tended by someone whose name we will never know. It is a strange thing to think about, a tiny light inside a vanishing world. Across the bay, the Admiral Pliny had not turned back. His ships had fought against winds that seemed to push them away from the mountain, as if the sea itself understood what the people on land did not yet. But Pliny was stubborn and curious and bound by duty. He landed at Stebiae, a little town along the coast, at the house of a friend named Pomponianus. The friend was terrified. Goods were already loaded onto boats, ready to flee. But the wind was wrong. The sea was wrong. Nothing could leave. So Pliny did something remarkable. He bathed. He dined. He spoke calmly, the old accounts say, hoping his calm would steady the household. And then, because he was an old man and it had been a long day, he went to sleep. His servants could hear him snoring through the door. Outside, the courtyard began to fill with ash and pumice. If he had slept much longer, the doorway would have been blocked entirely. They woke him. They tied pillows to their heads with cloth to protect themselves from falling stone, and they walked out into a night that was darker than any night has a right to be. They carried torches. The torches showed them only each other. The air smelled of sulfur. The ground, when the tremors came, moved beneath them like a living thing rolling over in sleep. They made it to the shore, and there, by the water, the old man sat down. He was heavy, and his breathing had always been poor, and the air was thick with gas now. He asked for water. He drank it. He lay down on a sail that someone had spread for him, and the dark went on. His nephew, writing years later, would try to describe what he had seen from across the bay. He would write about the cloud, about the flames on the mountain, about his mother, begging him to leave her behind and save himself, and his refusal. He would write it all down so carefully, so precisely, that almost 2,000 years later we would still be able to stand in the ruins and match his words to the stones. The fire crackles, a small log shifts. That is all. In Pompeii, the final surge came sometime after dawn, though no one would have known it was dawn. The sky was still closed. The city was already buried up to the second stories of many of its houses. And then the cloud came down. It moved through the streets faster than sound. It was hot enough that those it reached did not suffer for long. This is the one small mercy in the story, and the tellers of the old accounts return to it often because they need to. After the surge, more ash fell, and more. For 2 days, the mountain went on emptying itself. When it finally stopped, Pompeii was gone. Not destroyed, exactly. Buried, sealed, pressed beneath nearly 20 feet of volcanic stone and dust. The streets were invisible. The rooftops were invisible. Even the shape of the city, the outline where walls had stood, was invisible. And the strange thing, the thing that would matter later, was what that burial did. It kept things. In most places where people have lived and died, the years come through like water. They wash away the small details. The shape of a loaf of bread on a table, the coins left beside a cup, the pattern of a mosaic floor still wet where someone had just mopped it, the graffiti a child scratched into a wall the afternoon before. None of that usually survives. Time is gentle but relentless. It takes things. But in Pompeii, time was stopped. The ash sealed the city the way amber seals an insect. Loaves of bread, still in the oven where the baker had left them, would be pulled out, charred but whole, centuries later. Paintings on the walls would keep their colors. A dog, chained in a doorway, would leave behind a perfect hollow shape of itself in the hardened ash, and when archaeologists poured plaster into that hollow, the dog would appear again, exactly as it had been. Nothing like this had ever happened to a Roman city. Nothing like it, perhaps, has ever happened anywhere. Add a little wood to the fire if you like, or don't. The embers are enough. The story keeps going on its own now, quiet as ash settling on a rooftop, quiet as a city going to sleep beneath a gray and endless sky. For a long time after that, the land where Pompeii had been was simply quiet. The ash hardened, grass grew over it. Farmers came eventually and planted vines on the slopes where the slopes had always been. They did not know at first what was beneath their feet. They knew only that the soil was rich. Volcanic soil often is. Sometimes a farmer's plow would turn up a piece of marble, a fragment of painted plaster, a coin. The old stories in the countryside remembered that a city had once been there, somewhere, but the exact place had been forgotten. It had the quality of a rumor, a thing people half believed. Centuries passed. Rome rose further and fell. Kingdoms came and went along that coast. The mountain erupted again and again, smaller each time, mostly. And still Pompeii slept. It would be more than 1,600 years before anyone began carefully to dig. A workman in the 1590s, cutting a channel for water, struck stone he could not explain. Inscriptions. Walls. No one yet understood what they had found. The real excavations would not begin until the 1700s, when a king with a taste for antiquities sent men down into the earth with shovels, and the city began, slowly, to come back into the light. And when it did, what they found was not really ruins. Ruins are what happens when time works slowly on a place. This was something else. This was a day, a single day, held still, the loaves in the oven, the dog in the doorway, a political slogan painted on a wall asking for a vote in an election that was never held, for a man who did not live to take office, the fountain where someone had stopped to drink, the small, ordinary things of a life that had expected to continue. You can walk those streets today. The stones are still rutted where cartwheels passed over them, thousands of times, for hundreds of years, before the mountain ever stirred. The fire is low. The night has deepened around us. Listen for a moment. There is only the soft crackle of the coals, and somewhere, very far away, in a warm country across the sea, a city lies under the open sky again, breathing slowly, remembering how to be seen. 17 centuries would pass before anyone thought to look beneath the fields again. In that long silence, the world above forgot what lay below. Farmers plowed the ash and grew grapes on the slopes of the same mountain that had swallowed their great-grandparents' world. Roads were laid, villages rose. The Bay of Naples went on being beautiful, as it always had been, as if nothing had ever happened there at all. Then, in the 16th century, a man digging a water channel struck something hard. Marble. Inscriptions. A wall painted in colors no one had used in 1,000 years. The diggers paused, pulled a few pieces free, and moved on. The channel was more important than old stones. But word traveled, as it always does, and slowly the rumor spread that there was a buried city under the hill they called Civita. It took another 200 years before anyone dug seriously. When they did, what they found was unlike anything the world had seen. Not ruins, exactly. Ruins are broken things, weathered and scattered. This was something else. This was a city caught mid-breath. Loaves of bread still sitting in the ovens where bakers had left them. Wine jars sealed and stacked in cellars. A dog's chain still bolted to a wall. Coins on a countertop, arranged as if someone had just been counting them and would be back in a moment to finish. The ash had done something strange and terrible, and in its way, miraculous. It had pressed down so fast and so completely that it had taken the shape of everything it covered. Wooden doors rotted away inside their ash shells and left perfect hollow molds behind. Shutters, bed frames, baskets, and in the deepest layers, the shapes of people, curled on their sides, shielding children, holding one another. A 19th century archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli figured out how to read those hollows. He poured plaster into them, gently, carefully, and waited for it to set. When the ash around the plaster was brushed away, the people of Pompeii appeared again. Not their bodies, which were long gone, but the shape of the last moment they had ever held. A man with his arms over his face. A woman with her cloak pulled across her mouth. A family together. The fire crackles softly, and the night listens. People who made those plaster casts understood, maybe for the first time, what Pompeii really was. It wasn't a ruin. It was a record. a single day, held in place. Every other ancient city we know has come down to us in fragments, a column here, a mosaic there, the slow scatter of time taking pieces away. Pompeii came down to us whole, the graffiti on the walls still legible, election posters for candidates who lost to the ash, a child's scrawl of a horse next to a doorway, someone's shopping list, someone's love note, someone's complaint about the wine at the bar down the street. Imagine walking those streets now, in the long golden afternoons when the tourists have thinned out and the light comes slanting across the stones. The wheel ruts are still there in the paving, worn by carts that stopped rolling in the year 79. The stepping stones across the gutters are still where they were laid, so you can cross the street without getting your sandals wet. The bakeries still have their millstones. The taverns still have the round holes in the counters where hot food was kept warm. A whole ordinary Tuesday afternoon paused and then dusted off and offered back to us. And the mountain is still there. Vesuvius. Green now, quiet now, with houses creeping up its sides again the way they always have. Geologists watch it closely. They know it is not finished. It has erupted many times since Pompeii, in 1631, in 1794, in 1906, in 1944 during the war, when American soldiers watched lava flow past their airfields. It will erupt again. The only question is when, and who will be living in its shadow when it does. But that is a worry for the daylight. Tonight, the fire is warm, and the story is old, and the people of Pompeii are resting where they have rested for a very long time. 17 centuries of silence, and then the gentle brush of archaeologists, and then the quiet gaze of strangers walking through their kitchens and their gardens and their streets. A city that was lost, and then was found, and is now, in its strange way, more present than almost any other place from that ancient world. Still here, still whispering, still waiting to be listened to. When the diggers came, centuries later, they found loaves of bread still in the ovens, round and black and whole. They found frescoes as bright as the day they were painted. They found a small dog, curled as if asleep. And in the hollow spaces where bodies had long since dissolved, they poured plaster and lifted out the exact shapes of people in their last moment. A mother shielding a child, a man reaching for a door, hands held. It is a sad story and a strange one, but it is also, in a quiet way, a story of care. Because Pompeii is the most human city we have from the ancient world. Not its emperors, not its wars, its bakeries, its graffiti, its gardens, its Tuesday afternoons. The mountain took it, and the mountain kept it. The fire here is burning low now. The night is soft, and somewhere in Italy, under a sky full of the same old stars, the ruins are quiet beneath the moon. If you're still with me, and the fire feels like a good place to be, follow along. There's a new story waiting here every night. The fire's yours now. Close your eyes. The story continues in your dreams. Stories under the stars, here every night. Sleep well.